Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Theme Park Workshop, the podcast. My name is Jonathan, and today I'm here with Adam. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good. It's been a week, but I'm really excited for today.
Are you still feeling the chill of our icebreaker conversation?
Yes, because as we speak, I'm still editing it. But yeah.
Yeah, and you said you had a dream about Iron Gwazi, right?
I did. My brother and I abandoned you, and we wrote it ourselves.
It's awful. I feel betrayed already.
Yeah, it was awful, but the writer's great, so I'm looking forward to it.
Are you sure this isn't a premonition? You sure this?
Well, you've got a higher past than I do, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. All right. So real life doesn't add up. Well, this week we actually have a special guest on the show. We have AJ Danna, who is just a mastermind of vocal work for so many theme park attractions. I don't know if that's a great intro, but welcome to the show, AJ.
Well, thanks for having me. Oh my gosh, the pressure is on now.
Yeah, so go ahead and give us a little introduction to who you are and what you do and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, my name is AJ, just like Adam and Jonathan put together. AJ, that is me. I am a lifelong Southern California native and grew up as a theme park fan, of course, going to all the parks around here. And when it came time for me to transition into my full-time career as an actor, what better choice than to work on themed entertainment? It's something that influenced me as a child, and now I get to give back. So a lot of the work that I do has been with immersive companies and immersive attractions, including work at Universal, but mostly on the voiceover end now is where I'm working around some Halloween events and doing a lot of voiceover in different capacities for themed entertainment. So that is, in my opinion, one of my favorite ways to tell stories through immersive entertainment. And we will be getting into all about the science of that today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. All of it.
Yeah, so let's start with you kind of introduced us a little bit to your history, but maybe what was your first voice role in an attraction?
So the one that really stands out in my memory as something that changed a lot for me was in 2019. I was asked to be the new main gate voice for Los Angeles Haunted Hayride, which is in Griffith Park in California. And Los Angeles Haunted Hayride had an overhaul that year from Plague Productions and 13th Floor Entertainment. And 13th Floor Entertainment Group is a company that franchises a lot of haunted attractions all around the United States. And little did I know that when I was asked to provide the new main gate voice for Haunted Hayride, that I would be asked back to do several different projects for 13th Floor, which has been Nashville Nightmare and stuff in Louisiana. Essentially, a lot of different franchise haunts that came through that particular job. And the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride job was also really special as like a first major headline event job because I got to do a classic hands, arms, feet, and legs safety spiel for the hayride, which was a bucket list item checked off right there.
That's amazing.
Keep your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the vehicle.
So you said you got a lot of starts with the haunts. Are you into haunts yourself? Like, do you like the haunted stuff?
I most definitely do. I have been attending haunted attractions since 2008. And at this point in time, on and off, if I pursue a haunted attraction job this year, this will be my 10th year of performing in a haunted attraction. I've played 30 different characters at Universal, Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood, including most recently in the Bride of Frankenstein Lives attraction, one of my favorite mazes. I've done stuff, of course, for Haunted Hayride in person as well. I did improv for them in Town Square. Warner Brothers Horror Made Here. And then in 2020, when the world shut down, we had a lot of drive-through events, which is something I worked on a lot of as well, including on the voiceover end. And I worked for an event called Hauntoween. I played a pun skeleton named Funny Bones, and then also worked for the Stranger Things drive-in. So Halloween is definitely a big part of my life, big part of my career, and one of the things I love most about theme parks. I mean, Haunted Mansion, one of the first influences on my haunt career.
You're my kind of guy.
Absolutely.
Love it.
I wish I could relate. I'm not into the haunts. I can't get over the scares just yet. But Adam is adamant that someday he will get me to do horror nights. So I apologize that I won't be able to relate to this. So Adam, you can continue the horror conversation for a minute if you want.
Sure. So you said like you've done jobs like around the country. Do you actually go to these different areas? Like I know you said you did Horror Nights Hollywood, but you've also done Nashville and Louisiana. Are you in there? Are you recording in SoCal? You know, sending them your file, or you're like,
Yeah.
hey, let's.
It is very helpful, especially during the pandemic, to have a home recording studio, which is something I do have. And I record everything from home here. 13th Floor also has a couple of affiliate offices out here if need be. But I've been very fortunate to record everything at my home studio, and then it gets shipped all around the country from there.
Cool.
The pandemic has done a really awesome thing in making work from home a viable option for companies. For all the bad things that have happened, the feasibility of work from home being presented has been one of the good ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of advantages in storytelling as well in this time, even though there were horrible things going on outside of our door in these last couple years. We all found a way collectively to still create escapism and to still have attractions safely. And a lot of that actually did have to do with bringing things inside your car. And bringing things inside your car, one thing comes to mind. Well, how are we going to hear the experience if we're inside our car? And that leads exactly to a point in which I was very, very fortunate to work a lot during the pandemic in themed entertainment, was drive-through attractions. So any of our listeners out there in Southern California, the Stranger Things drive-into experience was primarily voiceover based. There was also the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride live drive-up experience, which I was in fact the narrator for. And even around the country, 13th Floor had City of the Dead, which I also did voiceovers for in your car. And I'll definitely talk a little bit more about that later, how essentially the pandemic entertainment sort of redefined the campfire story and brought things back to a little more intimate point of storytelling where you're the only people hearing the dialogue of this attraction in your car. It's more personal.
And you can read more about that in your article that you read for Attractions Magazine, and we'll have that link in the show notes. It's a great article, and it's really interesting. But when I was reading it, and as you're talking right there, what I'm noticing is there's a lot of local stuff. I know you said you've worked with Universal and some of the bigger names, but there's a lot of local stuff that I think we tend to forget about. Like I know in my backyard, maybe like an hour away, there's Sir Henry's, which is a smaller haunt that, unless you're in the haunt scene, you've probably never heard about. So I'm curious, and this doesn't just have to be about haunts, but what are something folks don't usually think about when it comes to theme entertainment?
Well, I think something that the general public maybe doesn't realize is just how long the people behind the scenes work on these attractions. And that's especially evident in the local things, because sometimes those are the only things they work on throughout the year. Unlike something a park like, for example, Universal or Knott's Berry Farm, where they have many different events throughout the year. They're still working behind the scenes on Halloween, even in springtime, but it's not necessarily the focus. I've been very, very fortunate to stay working throughout the year, even if it's just for Halloween, because we're already preparing things right after the last Halloween season ends. And, the teamwork behind these attractions, again, like we hear a lot. This is one reason I liked the series One Day at Disney, is it really spotlighted the individuals that are behind these attractions. And so I strongly encourage anyone who is visiting a place of themed entertainment to consider just how many artisans have been working for tireless hours, whether it's a mom and pop haunt in your backyard or a corporate event. People are, pouring hours and hours of work into these projects. And, sometimes they're not even documented on camera. These are things that may just live on in your memories, but that is enough of a place to have an influence in somebody's life. I know it certainly did when I was going to parks as a child.
Absolutely, yeah. Sometimes preservation by memory is the most enchanting, where there is an air of mystery to it, and I think that's something that we wanted to explore at some point is theme parks, and how as art forms they're constantly evolving, so that for like the early years of theme parks, like so much of that is undocumented in detail, just because of the lack of prevalence of cameras, and because they're ever changing art forms. You get the nostalgia and the memory along with the new almost every time you go, and how that's one of the beauties of theme parks as an art form. But yeah, just the fact that you work on so many like smaller things that are temporary that people put so much work into to give that experience is awesome.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very grateful for that. And it's funny that you should mention that because that brought up a point that I've been thinking about as well is when you think about a long-standing theme park such as Disneyland or Walt Disney World, you're faced with a really interesting perspective here when you consider that these are not only creative venues where people are presenting projects and pouring their art into these worlds, but it's also a cultural institution because
Mm.
of these attractions that go back to the dawn of themed entertainment. They are not only a product, they are also a collective memory. And that sort of brings about the question, who owns a theme park? The people who design and create for it, or the people who've had it in their memory for 50 years or more? It's fascinating.
Absolutely, and I don't think there's any auteur theory when it comes to theme park attractions. So it's very much as attractions individually, they are most definitely the product of thousands of artists coming together. Obviously, you have a project director, but I feel like there's less of like the idea in movies where one director you can get little hallmarks of what they do in all their films. I feel like that's less so in theme park attractions for a number of reasons. But I don't know where I was going with that. That was just an interesting thing to me.
Well, on the subject of attractions that live on in our memory and how the work of these artists has prevailed over the decades in some cases, I'm sure that you guys, just like me, are heavily influenced by the attractions at Disney that were built 40, 50 years ago. And in a lot of these attractions are voiceover performances that essentially shaped the fact that I wanted to be an actor. And this
Oh wow.
goes for Paul Frees in the Haunted Mansion, obviously being the first and foremost inspiration I think of as the first voice I took note of. And there
Mm.
are, many cartoons on television or animated films, but you're seeing them associated with physical characters. You're seeing them with drawings. Whereas the ghost host in the Haunted Mansion, I definitely noticed when I was young that this is a character that is primarily a voice and the rest is in your imagination. And what a powerful performance at that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I've heard theories that, like in the Haunted Mansion, there's like a raven that's supposed to be the ghost host. Like that's a theory, but I think you're right. The power of that performance is in the invisibility of it. Same as the dead man tell no tales and Pirates of the Caribbean. Like for me, that was one of the ones that stood out. Like that whole experience, even at the Magic Kingdom. I know it's the lesser version, it's the half version, but like going on that experience and getting that kind of immersivity, so to say, like that is a surround sound voice, same as Ghost Host. Those are both like standout experiences for me when I went to Disney. It didn't lead me on the same path as you, of course, but they do have that power.
And it's funny that you should mention that because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the voice actor who uttered the phrase "Dead Men Tell No Tales" is also Paul Frees.
Oh, there you go. Look at Paul go.
That's awesome.
Another classic of the original Disney era would be Thurl Ravenscroft. Of
Yeah.
course, the classic voice of Tony the Tiger, also in Pirates of the Caribbean as several different characters and in the Haunted Mansion. And, it's funny because the way these actors would work on Disney projects back then, it was almost like a troupe. You had the Mellow Man and you had this small group of actors just kind of working on whatever Walt Disney and the team were dreaming up next. And they've gone on like I think the intention of course was to make sure Disneyland was something of semi-permanence, but I wouldn't think a troupe of actors would imagine just how much of an influence these sound bites and the fact that we can still speculate about if the ghost host is the raven or if he's in the painting, is he in the stretching room. I don't think they were quite prepared, or maybe they were and they were just very ahead of their time to like
Yeah.
how decades later we would still be studying these performances and their relevance to the story in our memory.
Absolutely. And I think especially when it comes to um like characterization, I know we talked a little bit beforehand about how there are different voice actors who like just make specific noises and sounds for attractions. One that comes to mind for me is Mystic Manor at Hong Kong Disneyland, and the performance that I want to say, oh, it's the same guy who does Curious George. He does like a lot of monkey noises. I forget what his exact name is. I should know this though because I looked it up. But he voices Albert's monkey. Or no, the monkey's named Albert. Then
Yes,
Albert.
Lord
he voices
Henry
Albert.
Mystic's monkey, Albert.
Albert, yeah.
And the actor you're looking for is actually Frank Welker.
Frank Welker, that's it. Scooby-Doo himself.
Yes, Frank Welker, the classic master of animal sounds. And if I'm not mistaken, Frank Welker is also the voice of Max the dog in the Grinch movie with Jim Carrey.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the performance and the charm that's given to characters like that has made them live on, even in that's obviously a newer attraction, but in recent memory that leaves people clamoring for, hey, we want this character and this story to be brought stateside. And I just think that's really cool that so much of that is just the performance of you connect through how the monkey sounds. It's like when he's screaming and he's pinned down by the arrows, you're just like, oh no. But
yeah, absolutely. I had once been sort of mentored as a young child by a voice actor named Fred Newman, and Fred Newman was on Prairie Home Companion, the radio show, and he did voices for Reading Rainbow and Doug, the original Doug TV show. And a story that he told was how he's also very well known for these animal sounds and how you can capture emotion through that. And he had mentioned an example of a story featured a frog that swallowed a wedding ring and then like burped it up, and they were like, oh, I know exactly who to call for that, and I think it's so fascinating. D. Bradley Baker also comes to mind. I'm sure you know D. Bradley Baker from Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law. D. Bradley Baker is the voice of Perry the Platypus and also the voice of the parrot in the queue line for Pirates of the Caribbean, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
wow.
That's amazing. Yeah, D is incredible. He headlined the Bad Batch series like it was nobody's business. But
yeah. And of course, Legends of the Hidden Temple can't go wrong with some classic Universal Studios Florida, Nickelodeon Studios history there as well. And finding that niche in voiceover is something that I'm very lucky to say I have essentially found, because a lot of my work in themed entertainment is through Halloween events. And so it's oftentimes like, oh, we need a really scary, deep voice, because my voiceover characters don't sound like my normal voice, like many people don't. It's like, we need this deep, menacing voice for the main gate. Let's call AJ. We need a vampire. Perfect. Let's call AJ. There was a franchise of haunts called Love Bites, a Valentine's haunted house that 13th Floor did. And it was like a What We Do in the Shadows type of vampire. And they had me come in and do some stuff about like, this is the humans vampire party, yes, blah, blah, yes. And like just cheesy comedy horror vampire. And on that subject of getting called for one specific thing, a story that sticks out in my mind was 13th Floor Entertainment had acquired another attraction, and the brand name had changed when they acquired it. And they already had a voiceover with the old brand name in it in like a whole paragraph. But when the acquisition was made, they needed to replace the brand name. And I'm very, very, very lucky and grateful to say that I am the guy they called to record the 5 words to do the new brand name. And that's how you really know you found the niche in the Halloween world. And I'm very lucky.
Absolutely. That's incredible.
I was going to joke and I said, did you get the additional voices credit? But I guess I don't. Do you know of what? I mean, obviously they have like their troupe, their like repository of people they go to a lot, but is there like internal credits? Do you know? It's like, oh yeah, AJ did this voice, yeah, let's call him, or anything like that?
Yep, pretty much. And when the beauty of the industry is once you work with somebody and you're cordial and you do a good job, you show you're easy to work with, you will probably get called back. And in themed entertainment, we were discussing this at the beginning of the show. It is a real bummer that there is not more of a database of credits for themed entertainment, because there is a wealth of actors who work, whether it's Disney or Universal, and these performances that stick out in our memory, like think for example, Paul Frees, obviously Haunted Mansion, we all know the voice, but Haunted Mansion is not listed on his IMDb because it's not a movie or TV show, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
sure, you've got sites like Behind the Voice Actors and stuff, but I feel like there needs to be a more central database of themed entertainment voice actors so we can give these artists their proper due. A
Absolutely.
friend of mine comes to mind, Isaac Robinson Smith, very talented gentleman I know I've worked with a couple of times in the park world, is the voice of Black Panther in Avengers Campus.
Oh
And like,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
what an amazing honor to carry on Chadwick Boseman's legacy as his character. And in that sense, it's almost like for internal purposes, it's good to know, oh, that was Isaac. Let's hire him, again, because he was very good. But on the other hand, you don't really want to break the illusion that,
Yeah.
this character is still, here alive and well. And so it's sort of a double-edged sword. It's like you've got the character integrity side of things, and then you've got credit where credit is due. So most of where we do get credit in themed entertainment voiceover is just by word of mouth and on our resumes on who we worked with, and one thing leads to another, and there you go, you're back in the booth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once it's the classic kind of movie industry thing is it's the people you know, and then once you know the people and your if your work speaks for itself, it's like you're in. You got it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do like that, especially within Disney, these people that we know for one role probably also did 10 more that we don't know off the top of our head. For example, Corey Burton, amazing, fantastic voice actor, big influence on me, big help to me. Corey Burton is the Haunted Mansion Holiday Ghost host, for those who may not know. He's also many different voice matches within the Disney company. He's Dale for Chip and Dale, Ludwig von Drake, and countless others. But you would probably not know he's also the hello everyone, welcome aboard the Mickey and Friends tram. Like he's all the way down
Oh.
to the parking lot tram. Same guy getting all the jobs because he's great. It's that utility that really shines in that voiceover community.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say when you were talking about the credit where credit is due versus illusion, the thing that came to my mind was Rod Sterling in the
Mm,
Twilight Zone Tower of Terror and the guy that they
mhm.
got to match that performance. And that's always been just fascinating to me because it was, when they made that it was 93 and they didn't have the CGI technology that we have today, so they just had to repurpose a clip from the actual Twilight Zone and cut it just before he, said something different, and so they just re-recorded the entire line with the new voice actor to match. And as a filmmaker, I just find the making of a pre-show, especially in that sense of thinking, all right, we need this exact line and we have to recast the voice this way. It's just very, it's a very unique type of filmmaking that I would love to get into. But yeah, that was kind of just to tie it back to, do you list credits? Do you have credits available for people, or do you have the full illusion of it being Rod Sterling the entire time?
Absolutely. That is a great point and a fantastic example for exactly that concept of keeping the illusion alive. That was such a perfect marriage of the video that they already had from Twilight Zone with the technology they had at the time. And of course, iconic Rod Serling performance by Mark Silverman, who also does the voice in the ride. Another formative performance in my mind because Disney and theme parks in general, IP based attractions particularly, are very strong with voice match performances, and that's where the original actor isn't available anymore, or it's been decades and they no longer play the character. Perfect example is Mark Silverman. And the more I learned that there was a niche market for voice matches in themed entertainment, especially, that's sort of one of the reasons I made that one of my specialties. I do a lot of impressions, you could say, or voice match performances, and I like to hone that because there's always going to be a use for that when it comes to IP based attractions. It's especially something as timeless as the Twilight Zone. Really can't go wrong, and really a clever way to make sure that illusion was sold. And on that topic, that's one of the last attractions I can think of in recent memory that features a narrator essentially guiding you through the attraction. And something that I had here in my outline when thinking about voiceover and themed entertainment is the way our storytelling has evolved since like the 1960s and the World's Fair attractions up until now. The way the character who is speaking to you in the ride communicates to you and the character's relationship to you has changed. obviously we have the Haunted Mansion back in the day, and we've got, great moments with Mr. Lincoln and, Carousel of Progress. And they were really kind of groundbreaking when it came to attractions like Haunted Mansion because, excuse me, even though the ghost host is a narrator, he's kind of poking fun at the fact that he's a narrator. He's essentially taking you along by the hand. He's a character who is sort of there with you. Even though he's not there with you, he is more than just a voice of God, so to speak, in the ride. And as time goes on, we've definitely seen a transition from these characters who are sort of talking at you to characters that are fully ingrained. I'm assuming you have both been on Rise of the Resistance.
Yes.
Excellent ride, excellent use of technology and storytelling, and probably one of the best recent examples of how voiceovers have changed, especially in IP-based attractions. We no longer have a character describing to us what's happening or what we should be looking at. The characters are now in the action with us, more reminiscent to a video game. You've got Lieutenant Beck and you've got Finn and you've got Poe talking to you throughout the ride. And, when he mentions like, oh, we got past the droids. Very good. We're going to move on now. Like, it's almost like he's there with you, which is something I just find fascinating. It's more immersive now than ever, I think.
That's a great performance by James Arnold Taylor as well in an original character for the attraction. I got to ask, while we're on the topic of Rise of the Resistance, when the ride debuted, there was a lot of kerfuffle online about whether or not they actually got Adam Driver back. Would you happen to know if that is Adam Driver or if it is a very talented voice actor?
I was just at Disneyland yesterday and I was wondering the same thing, because if that's not Adam Driver, that is a very good voice match.
Sir, the prisoners have escaped.
How brave, but ultimately hopeless. There's nowhere to run.
On the topic of Galaxy's Edge, continuing, the performance that Jim Cummings gives as Hondo Ohnaka is one of my personal theme park favorites. Just the range and the performance that he brings to that character, where you have to have this character who's like a pirate, a smuggler, but he also has to be nice to you, because if he gets too mad at the guests, you're going to get negative feedback. So he's got to be like, the lovable pirate. But I just think from start to finish, and the fact that he didn't actually play the live action Hondo. So there's like in the pre-show video, there's like a live action version of him that he presumably had to lip sync. There's just good performance all the way through, including as you're walking through the queue, there's like a whole audio show of things that are going on at his transport solutions where things are breaking and employees are going crazy. But yeah, that's one of my favorites. So I felt the need to talk about that for a sec.
Well, to bring them all together to AJ's original point, I never really realized that both of those attractions, the characters are still narrators. Beck is still breaking down, and I think Finn pops up for like 2 seconds. It doesn't feel like a narration because he's talking at you. He said, oh, we got to get down to the transports. We got to take this lift. Oh, where are you going? The stupid droid. Like, there's character in it. Not that, other attractions didn't have character, but like, he is a character in the same way you're a character. And Hondo telling you what to do, or Chewbacca if you, cheat code the attraction. They're telling you what to do and what you should be experiencing, but it really doesn't feel like that, because those are so immersive attractions. And as we've been talking, Chris Diamantopoulos' performance as Mickey Mouse in Runaway Railway here in Orlando keeps on coming back to me, especially that track switch line that's just become a bit of a meme on Diz Twitter. As you're saying, like, that's an interaction. Now, while that one is more of how theme park rides or immersive entertainment might be like a surround experience, like film, because you're watching a lot of that, you're participating in it, but they're not really participating with you. All the Disney characters are off doing their thing and you just happen to be in it, but just how those voices still pull you in.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Adam, and good way to tie it back. I completely agree. It almost feels task based, so to speak. It's almost like they're giving you something to do rather than just existing in the environment. The characters are now right alongside you, and they are still, as you mentioned, still narrators, so to speak, telling you what's going on or what to do, but in a way that feels more personal.
Yeah.
And it's almost more akin to like a video game in the sense of like they are there to help you achieve something in the story as opposed to just guiding you along. And I really think that's fascinating. It's fascinating to look at and think about how it still serves the same purpose, but in a way that feels just hyper advanced now. And especially during the pandemic, when we had to take a couple steps back and break down immersive storytelling to its very core, that sort of storytelling is something that ended up shining. And I do think of the Stranger Things drive-in as another example that comes to mind. For those of you who might not know, the Stranger Things drive-in was in a singular parking structure in downtown Los Angeles, several different floors of the parking structure, and each of the floors was used as a different set from the Stranger Things show that you would drive through. So you started on the ground floor in the Starcourt Mall, and then it turns out, Murray Bauman, the conspiracy theorist, is here to shut down your tour of Starcourt Mall and take you to a secret Russian lab. So you've got Murray on like the walkie-talkie on your car's radio frequency communicating, okay, everybody, we got to take you inside the mall. And then there was a live actor playing Murray with the, walking by with the walkie-talkie lip syncing. And then you would roll up inside the parking structure where you found yourself in a Russian laboratory where they're conducting, the experiments to open the portal. And all of this section was entirely told by voiceovers of characters that were there with you, telling you have to get inside quickly, you have to hide. You had Steve and Robin and their voiceovers like interacting with you. Hey, you in that car right there, we need you to duck, and I can still see your head, and all pre-recorded, but still just a really great way to make you feel like part of the action, even though everything was recorded remotely, everything happened with the windows rolled up. It's still guiding you through the story in a way that was literally theme park quality in a parking structure. I was very impressed and very happy to be involved with that experience.
Absolutely. I wish we had that experience here for us to experience. I know we do have a lot of good local drive-through haunts that I've heard about on Twitter, but it's probably, like you said, from the big budget stuff to the mom and pop stuff, so much work goes into these, and it's awesome that we're finding these creative ways to tell these stories in the pandemic, because immersive entertainment is such a unique art form, and you do have to get creative. I mean, that's kind of the thing that everybody's trying to push, is how do we give people the most agency in the narrative of the stories that we're telling, while also making it so that people can experience these stories without feeling frustrated, like it feels like an escape, not a challenge.
Absolutely.
I think there's a broad spectrum of that. You have things like I know Omega Mart is pretty big right now, and all the work that goes into that, from the actors to the voice acting, the background, the stories, that's a very multimedia experience, to things like we were talking about just a few minutes ago with Galaxy's Edge, where it's like, how much narrative control can you give the people in Smuggler's Run without letting them actually crash the Falcons, that it's a disappointing experience? Or how much simulation control can you give them? How much can you make Rise of the Resistance feel like you're giving the people choices? And it's slow and steady, but people have been trying to figure out how to increase immersiveness and engagement, I'd say, since the early shooter dark rides.
Yes.
And that was probably one of the places where it started. But even like, I know my dad likes to talk about when he went to Busch Gardens Tampa back in like, I want to say like the 70s or 80s, when they had the African Queen riverboat. Like they had like a live actor on that, like apparently all the time, that would like come out and like try and scare guests as part of the ride. And it's like, just that's something I think sometimes we forget. Like, live actors have been a part of attractions a lot longer than we think. But yeah, it's just really cool to see immersivity grow and change, and people to try different things. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they fail, but it's all at the very least interesting.
Absolutely. And, obviously going to take a very short detour here to talk about the immersion of the great movie ride, live actors in an
Yes.
attraction, absolute king of the rides for immersion right there.
Absolutely.
I love spieling attractions.
And you mentioned an interesting point about seeming spontaneous, like having how much narrative control can you have while still seeming like it's part of like you're the only group experiencing this. And an attraction that comes to mind very well for that is specifically the original Jurassic Park River Adventure. Another excellent example of an attraction that utilizes two different methods of narrating voice acting, because the first half of the experience, you've got this, John Hammond-esque narrator narrating your tour.
I got to talk about that for a second, because that's Richard Kiley. And what's so great is that I think that's the first transition from a book where they actually mentioned we got Richard Kiley, and then they got him for the movie, and then they also got him for the ride. And it was one of those things that was consistent all the way through. But yes, continue.
Excellent. Very good. Awesome fact there, Jonathan. Right on. Yeah, talk about immersion with the IP. Like, they followed through on that detail. So you're thinking at this point in time, you're halfway through the ride, you're like, oh, everything's going well. We got our professional narrator. And then, of course, your boat gets knocked off course and you're into the off limits areas. And then from that point on, every voice in the attraction is no longer a meta narrator, so to speak. You're not in a theme park. You've got the people telling you, no, and everything becomes more akin to what we're hearing now, like on Rise of the Resistance. And that was probably also ahead of its time, how you had a fake out. You had a voiceover fake out on who's going to be taking you through this attraction. I mean, how meta, how immersive, way ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I never even thought about that. Huh.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to always, take a deep dive on this stuff. I am somebody who spends a lot of my downtime figuring out how things work and why they resonate the way they do. And I'm sure I know for a fact that you guys are very much like that, through your content on YouTube and the stuff that you talk about in regard to these parks. There's a whole other level of enjoyment when you can get on the same page that the creators were on while you're enjoying it. You can enjoy it as an audience member or as with a creative eye, and really see what makes these attractions tick the way they do. That to me is, one of the main reasons I'm really grateful to be able to give back, because I've spent a lot of time analyzing this and finding ways to use those tips and tricks and put them back out into the world of attractions. And I think that's just always enhanced my appreciation for what is genuine storytelling.
Absolutely. I think when we did our video on Skull Island Reign of Kong, one of the things we talked about was just that the having different drivers in each vehicle and how much that adds the backstory and the layers. And it's so rare on a ride that's not a spiel attraction for the ride to really give much characterization to the main character outside of the plot. Like Rise of the Resistance has Lieutenant Beck, but I feel like you don't really get to know him as a character other than Resistance leader. But Kong starts out and you have this little portion at the beginning of the ride where you're just kind of going through the jungle headed to the Kong building, and the narrator is just, or the driver is telling you about, hey, this is my life, this is what I do, this is why I'm here. I'm happy to meet y'all, and you have 6 of those, or 5 or 6 different drivers, which gives it a uniqueness, and each one changes the tone in a different way.
You have different reactions to the danger and the adventure throughout as well.
Exactly. Yeah, there's the same story beats are presented with different reactions from the different characters. Like passing the big Kong bones, the cowgirl's like, and I thought we grew them big in Texas. and then you got the New York ex Kong who's like, I don't think we'll be seeing any Kong today. But yeah, that's just a really specific, interesting of variation in narration, how that can transform a ride experience. I think Universal, credit to them, Skull Island Reign of Kong is great in that aspect.
Absolutely. That was a great example, Jonathan. Right on. Yeah, that definitely is a way to further enhance not only the immersion of the character and the world building, but also something good for repeat guests. We're living in a time of unprecedented attendance through season pass programs to these parks. And so having, an annual pass holder want to come back multiple times to hear the different characters, to get to know, their take on the story is, I mean, honestly, really ingenious. And I do enjoy a good voiceover performance where you can learn a lot about the character essentially just from hearing their voice and how they talk about themselves. And I think that's why a lot of the Disney attractions resonated with me is in themed entertainment. Sometimes you've only got a couple of seconds to make a scene click. Whether it's think about the Pirates of the Caribbean, the gentleman in the jail cell with the dog. You've only got a couple seconds to know what's going on in that scene, and it needs to be very clear. The same goes for the characters, and you've got to know based on the way they sound if this character is hostile, if this character is on your side. You've got to be able to read their character pretty quickly. And you mentioned like Beck, like Lieutenant Beck, resistance leader, that's established, but there's not much more than that. But for the purpose of that story, that's all we need. We
Right.
already got that he's on your side. One that comes to mind also is a very obscure attraction. This is one of my personal favorite voiceover based attractions, very obscure. Knott's Berry Farm in California has a full-size replica of the Independence Hall building from Philadelphia right across the street. And Walter Knott had built this Independence Hall as an educational center that also has a show in it. And I believe the name of the show is A Storm in Philadelphia. And this is a entirely audio-based show in the signing of the Declaration of Independence chamber, where you hear each of the founding fathers having a discussion regarding the benefits and detractors of signing the Declaration of Independence. And it strikes me as one where you've got it. We know the founding fathers and their personalities from our history books, but hearing how they embodied each of those characters in a way that will differentiate them and the few things they say is so fascinating. Like everyone knows Benjamin Franklin is a bit of a silly guy with idioms and whatnots. So you've got some of the more serious founding fathers who will just say, I object. And then Ben Franklin comes in, well, gentlemen, if I do say so, and like you just get it. You get after a couple of seconds, you're like, oh my gosh, it's Ben Franklin, because he was the wise, cultured, silly storyteller. But anyways, I can, I nerd about this stuff for hours, but like that's an attraction that also really sinks in, is like you get to know these characters and who you get to feel what they were bringing to the table literally just through voiceovers, because that whole show is just speakers and like a surround system where they move between the desks, with just voiceover. And that's so cool to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's cool to hear about that because I've never been to California or been to Knott's. But if I'm looking up a POV to find out that experience, I wouldn't think to look up their Independence Hall. So to hear that there is this little scene attraction, but that's actually really brilliant in the artistry of it, that surely someone out of town would overlook, but maybe even folks in the backyard, would even overlook. I think that just speaks to just the level of detail that goes into every part of every attraction, every ride, every experience, from your AAA blockbusters to the Passion Project.
Absolutely, 100%. And at the end of the day, whether it's Rise of the Resistance or A Storm in Philadelphia and Independence Hall, these are all built for the same purpose, and that is to bring an audience into a story. And I think it's just the most beautiful thing that whether you are a kid or whether you're an adult and whether you're experiencing an e-ticket or just a side attraction, if you can achieve the same feeling of, oh, I was there, I was part of this, I took something away from this, then it doesn't really matter if you're working at, mom and pop haunt, down the road, or working at Halloween Horror Nights. As long as you can have your audience members, your guests, saying they felt something, then you did your job. And I think that's the most amazing part of storytelling, and something I'm very grateful to be part of.
Absolutely. This is kind of taking a different direction to the conversation, but as far as like the technical side of the industry, there's at least in theme parks, there's not usually a lot of examples that I can point to and say this performance was bad. But sometimes things don't miss the or things miss the mark. And famously, Universal's Hogwarts Express has a Hermione double who has been on there since the opening. That is not super close, And that's that's okay. I feel like that's a lot on casting directors and making sure that you cast the right person. Are there specific contracts that are signed into? So like once you say, "Hey, I'm going to voice this voice, my voice is going to stay there for X number of years, whether or not you like it from this point on," that would prevent changing something like that or fixing it based on guest feedback? I'm just kind of curious.
I can't speak to that side of things because most of my work thus far has been for seasonal entertainment, things that just pop up and go away where, contracts of that sort aren't involved. And
Yeah.
assuredly, if I was on such a contract, I would not be saying on a podcast. However, I will say that it is something I have pondered because something that comes to mind is the Indiana Jones Adventure attraction. Obviously had classic voiceovers from day one, the voice of Mara in the Chamber of Destiny, and that is iconic to that attraction. But there was like a month or so during a refurbishment period, I believe a couple of years ago, where the voiceover was completely switched.
Oh.
And it was bizarre because it was a very sudden switch and for seemingly no purpose. Now, I don't recall details of when this happened or exactly what it sounded like, but I do recall thinking, what was the purpose of changing this voice when everything else was already perfect with that? And it had been that way for a long time. And then just one day it switched back. It is an ongoing mystery. It is an ongoing mystery, though I do think on that subject, if changing out voices to be closer voice matches were to be a more common practice, I think Indiana Jones Adventure could probably use a couple of new Harrison Ford sound-alike lines in that attraction. But that makes me think that there may be something like that in place. I mean, obviously, I can't speak on it, and even if I did know, I probably wouldn't speak on it. But I do think that sounds like there may be something because we're living in an era where there are many, many different people that you have access to at any given point in time. And I'm of the belief that for some things, for example, in theme parks, some things don't change because they work.
Yeah.
Like, the technology in the Haunted Mansion, we should not update it. It works and it's worked for 50 years. But if you can get a voiceover to be optimized, why not? I think maybe we should, brush it up here and there sometimes.
Yeah, please don't bring on the artificial voice recreation that we've been seeing so much. I know you mentioned you're on TikTok. Disney introduced the whole I don't know if you've seen the AI voices of some of their characters. I know the Rocket Raccoon, Bradley Cooper AI voice. I hear that a lot on TikTok, and it's a little unnerving to think that you can turn people's voices into AI and they sound so strange. But yeah, I'm totally with you that sometimes recasting that's just the best way to do it.
Oh yeah, you think about something like the movie Rogue One, for example. Rogue One has the Grand Moff Tarkin appearing in that film, and he has a face that's been reconstructed through sort of almost like deep fake technology. I'm not sure if I'm using the right word. I apologize. I'm not a visual effects artist, but the key there was that his voice was just a voice actor. Like we didn't use AI for the voice. We hired an actor and then had the technology just for the face. And you know what? I am definitely a proponent of keeping voiceovers by actors because, no matter how close the tone of voice is in an AI recreation of a character, the thing that makes a voice actor is the word actor. And at the heart of any voice acting is acting.
It's very true.
And
I have not seen a computer that can act. Just saying, I haven't seen many computers that can act.
And even the computers that do act in animated films these days are designed and artistry, it's not a word, but that's just what's coming out by animators and craftspeople who do bring that flat 3D thing to life.
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
of course
that
the
human
performance
connection. You got it. That human touch is something that we can't lose. And in my opinion, as advanced as animatronic technology has come, there's still always something uncanny about that. No matter how good animatronics are, in many cases, these audio animatronic figures still have something uncanny about the eyes, for example.
Yeah.
And that I think goes to show that we can do a lot with technology as a tool in storytelling, as a tool, but technology should not ever, in my opinion, replace that spark that a human brings to the table, an artist.
Absolutely.
That little spark of.
Ah, I see where you're going with that. Very good.
Eric Idle's amazing performance in the Journey into Imagination.
Well, Epcot was another fantastic example of characters that are very distinct and attractions that have like very compelling narrations. Horizons comes to mind right away. Horizons, an attraction that is narrated by a couple from the future, and they're talking to you about the 21st century as a narrator, but still as an everyman on your side. Like, man, Disney was just really ahead of their time when it came to having a character right there with you that's narrating, but is still on your side. That's really that's very cool, and it's something that you feel on a deeper level than just as a guest.
Yeah, people still refer to Spaceship Earth by the narrators. That's the different generations. Is what narrator is this generation of Spaceship Earth?
Absolutely, great example. Carousel of Progress as well. Rex Allen, of course, classic Carousel of Progress, but then as things progressed and we ended up with these new scenes added, I believe the current voice is Gene Shepard, who is also the voice of A Christmas Story. So another voice of nostalgia, but definitely a defining factor. And like, I don't necessarily, at least in my mind, I wouldn't think the difference between classic Carousel of Progress and current Carousel of Progress is the new scene at the end. Like, I would just think of the voice first because it is a defining part of that attraction.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, just performances in general at the parks too. Like, you think of Patrick Warburton's iconic performance in the Soarin'. I guess he before the ride he says, "This is Soarin' to Tower. Get ready for takeoff." Like, that's such a
Soarin' to Tower. You're cleared for takeoff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that was great. I love that.
But wait, how would Mr. Rogers say it though? That's my question.
What was the line again? I've only done
Soarin' to
once.
Tower. You are cleared for takeoff.
Soarin' to Tower. We're ready for takeoff.
Oh, very
Something
good.
like that.
Bravo.
Oh man. So AJ, I'm curious because we've been talking at one point in the podcast. We were talking about how like these characters like narrate through the ride, but you also see them in the ride. But the ones that inspired you, and maybe there's not like a huge difference there, but the ones that inspired you were the ones you never really even saw. And I know in Horizons it sounds like, which again I didn't do. It was closed before I could even think what's Horizons, because but I guess what I'm trying to ask is, with that disappearance, I guess, of the disembodied voice, to try to make this more immersive thing where you do see the characters, even if they're not always on the ride with you or in the experience with you, you still kind of put a face to that. I guess, is there a different power there for you, or do you think it depends on the story? I'm curious, like with that kind of evolution in the way we use voices, what do you think?
Absolutely. I definitely have given thought to that because the first attraction that comes to mind is Phantom Manor. You've got this experience that is being narrated by a gentleman who, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I'm sure somebody out there knows the Phantom Manor lore very well, but if I'm not mistaken, it is confirmed now with the new refurbishment, especially, that her father is the Phantom, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
And so that character is Vincent Price's voice. He's the one narrating the attraction. And the fact that yes, he appears in portraits now and whatnot, but the fact that you were hearing him talking to you, and then there's that reveal at the end when the Phantom is there burying you alive, and it's got the same laugh as the narrator, then you click like, oh my gosh, there he is. That's the guy that we've been hearing. There's almost a different magic to that, because up until that point, you're wondering, who is this talking? What is his relationship to the story? Who is his relationship to me? And then you actually do get to see the physical embodiment of the Phantom, and it kind of brings it full circle. It's either worse than you're imagining, or it's a skeleton. I think there's definitely magic to be had in both versions. The Ghost Host still not really having a canon theory as to who he is. We can, kids can imagine what he must look like. And then you've got something like Phantom Manor, where, as they say in Rocky Horror, it's the anticipation of then seeing the character at the end of the attraction. Definitely, different strokes for different folks, but both equally as compelling to the mind. Disney does have a few examples that come to mind of characters that we never see that are borderline more amusing because we never see them. The one that comes to mind first is the archaeologist in the bottom of the well in Indiana Jones Adventures queue line. This is an effect that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, much like some of the effects in the queue line for that attraction. Unfortunately, just the way it is, especially when you're working with the public. There's a rope. There is a rope and there is a hole. And the rope leads down into this hole. And you've got the voice of a man deep, deep, deep inside this hole telling you, careful, I'm handling an artifact down here. No, just do me a favor. Don't pull the rope. And then you pull the rope and he's like, oh no. And it really just lets your mind run with the fact that there's a guy down there and oops, I just pulled the rope and now he's falling. And it's funnier because we never see him. It's entirely an auditory gag. And also the windows on Main Street USA, you've got little vignettes happening up in the windows that we're just hearing. And there's the music teacher, for example. And I think it just kind of enhances these experiences in a way that it's sort of like how it enhances the world. Think about when you are sitting on a bench at a theme park and you might hear conversations happening around you. You might be people watching with your ears. You're looking at the map in front of you, but you're hearing a family walk by talking about their plans. The world is rarely ever directly in front of us for us to see every detail. So why should theme parks be any different? You've got a cacophony of sound and sights and smells, and they're not all directly for you to experience. They're just there to populate the world. And one of the ways we can do that is voiceover, because we hear it, though it's not part of our experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And as you're talking about that, it reminded me of The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. Not the ride part itself, but the queue. I've ridden that ride, gosh, I don't know how long, 15 years at this point, since 2008 or 2007, whatever it may be. But only in the past couple of years did I ever go down the extended queue where there is still storytelling going on. It may not look it because you see extended queue, and that's kind of where you think the theming kind of ends. But they've got these like comic book style houses and apartments, and you can hear people talking about the events of the ride, before you go into the Daily Bugle. And for me, that completely opened up the world of that attraction in this part that most people either not care about or never see, or just kind of ignore. Just them saying like, hey, are you getting in the paper? Oh, what's this Doc Ock character? Why does he want the Statue of Liberty? Things like that. Like, I'm like, oh wow, this ride is even more detailed than it already is. It's always been here, but I'm just noticing this now, and my gosh, what a revelation.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We talked about that too. The not Poseidon's, the Islands of Adventure Port of Entry restrooms. There's like whole conversations going on above you, like while you're in there. It's just, you hear, especially Port of Entry is just a really great land for sound design and characterization of people up in the windows. But like if you take the time to listen, you can hear so many different things going on, and it's that subtle world building that's so unique, as well as it can become iconic. I know in Seuss Landing, a lot of people like to joke about the Q is for Quan is for quandary soundbite that plays in one little area just over and over, and it's just like it fits Dr. Seuss. It's just there.
That also brings to mind the Wizarding World of Harry Potter on both coasts. I've got Moaning Myrtle in the bathrooms, further expanding the world building. I mean, obviously she's a character primarily associated with restrooms in the franchise, so it makes sense for her to be there. But just that little extra something, Port of Entry is such a beautiful, beautiful area in a theme park. And the fact that they've got the audio playing there with these snippets of characters, and you've got like live characters walking around sometimes. Like I encountered a couple of like pirate maidens my last time in Port of Entry. It's just they've done a great job filling out the world. And in theme parks, world building is becoming more and more prominent. And I think utilizing multimedia in the sense of whether it's, audio or little visual snippets that you see, Secret Life of Pets comes to mind in Universal Studios Hollywood. There's little mail slots in the doors in the queue line. And if you peek in the mail slots in the doors, you see what's happening inside each of the apartments. Like just very small details that really help fill out the world. That stuff, that chef's kiss, that is the kind of storytelling I can always get behind. And seeing that and experiencing that in themed entertainment makes me very excited to see what clever little details the artists of today and tomorrow are going to continue to add to these experiences.
Yeah, and I know you were saying, we started out this conversation talking about how a lot of these are just lost to memory. I mean, we talk about that with like the smaller things, or you're not going to experience Horizons, for example. You can watch a video of Horizons, but that is far from what it was actually like. And even in what we have right now with all the tech, recording devices and whatnot, we're not going to get every small detail of what port of entry is like when it goes down in 60 years or something like that, or Harry Potter and all that. And this is a funny story about Jonathan. When we were doing our Kong video, he actually stood outside the Kong queue to capture all the outdoor audio so we could reference it and how it tells its story. And I remember hearing the port of entry, audio and thinking like, oh, what if we could do that too? But at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to be, gone eventually, but gosh, what it does in the time. And as you said a couple of minutes ago, you're not going to be able to get everything, because in life, you're not going to be able to get everything that's happening in the world around you. Why should theme parks be the same way? And you're right, it is just part of that immersive storytelling. And it is part of that, I don't know if beauty is the right word, because it is kind of sad, but kind of the temporariness of lived themed, whether it's it's artificial most of but nevertheless it feels real because it's immersive and themed. And it's just that it is a spark. It's there, we enjoy while it is there, and then when it goes out, we're glad we saw the spark, and we'll make another one.
Absolutely. That is a great way to put that. And I completely agree. It's just like in life, you might come across somebody on the street, and maybe I'm just getting sappy and dramatic now, but when you think about a person who's really touched your life, well, like Mr. Rogers, have you ever met someone who really touched your life? When you meet someone, you don't really know if you're going to see that person again unless they're in your particular social circle, And so when it comes to somebody friendly we met on the street, or the person who works at our grocery store, the person who works in a bank that we go to often, they could retire tomorrow. You never know. And so we have to take all these memories and these positive interactions we have and just carry that with us. And, perhaps it's awfully grand to compare theme parks in this scale, but gosh darn it, I just have to say, when you take a moment in a theme park and then you multiply that by 30,000, 40,000, however many individual guests are in a park on a given day, and you think about how many people are going to be walking away with separate yet communal memories of their day there, and these certain things, like if you've done a character, a voice for an attraction, 40,000 different memories are going to hear your voice and interpret it differently. And some of them will never see you again. Some of them will never hear it again. Some of them will only go on these rides once in their life. And yet its story touched them. Its feeling resonated with them. And it's something they will in turn tell their friends about, and they will maybe show their videos to their friends back home. You have so many different individual experiences around a collective story in a theme park. And the fact that it can only be experienced there together, and then in some cases you never see it again, that's magic.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have anything to add. That's very profound.
Was it too much? Did it feel too profound?
Nah.
No, not compared to stuff Adam's written.
Well, then you know what? We'll cut me asking if it was too profound, and we'll just sound like I'm some wise old theme park guru, and we'll say, there you go.
No, that'll be perfect. That'll be perfect. So AJ, before you go, we wanted to ask, what advice would you give to the people listening to this podcast who maybe want to become a part of, this voice acting, being in the theme park industry, being involved in themed entertainment? Where would you tell them to start? Are there things they need, like a reel, or is it just one good performance? Like, what advice would you give?
My advice regarding becoming a voice actor and also working in themed entertainment starts with one simple concept: be a fan. Be a fan of voiceover, be a fan of theme parks, analyze how things work and why they succeed the way they do. The more media you consume, the more parks you visit, the more you sort of internalize the stories that are out there, the performances that are out there, the more you expose yourself and you immerse yourself in these worlds and in these types of performances, it'll rub off on you. But more specifically, once you're a fan of these projects, of these types of jobs, hone your craft so that you can use your fandom in tandem with your craft. And for aspiring voice actors out there, a piece of advice that was passed along to me was the key to being a good voice actor is being a good listener. Goes right along that side. Listen to something and then repeat it. Listen to your favorite character, try to imitate them. Think about the people that are in your life, your teachers, your friends, your parents, and start trying your hand at mimicking in a respectful way the characters that are around you. Embody the voices that you have in your everyday life. That's a great place to start. From there, there is obviously professional voiceover training available. I'd recommend pursuing that so you can learn about the acting side of voice acting. Being a good listener, being a good actor, they're not mutually exclusive. They go together. And then from there, if you're looking to work in themed entertainment, make sure to polish those skills, get professional training, get a professional reel put together once you feel that your skills are where they should be, and then just start networking. Find other people who love the things that you love, because chances are the people who are creating the things that we love also love it. The people behind the scenes are just as passionate as we are. In many of these cases, the people making, for example, Halloween attractions were totally Halloween kids growing up as well. And, the more you share that collective passion with the world around you, the more you'll be able to truly give back and nurture that passion in others.
Absolutely. And I think, anybody who is interested, absolutely take heed. I know neither Adam or I are actual voice actors, but we do have characters on the show, and we love theme parks, and we work to practice it. And so if we even got an interview with AJ here, that's a huge achievement for us. One step of networking. If you guys can absolutely do the same, it is just a matter of putting in the time and making the commitment.
Yeah. I want to thank you, AJ, for coming on the show and taking interest in our small little gig, and having this great conversation, imparting your wisdom and your experience and whatnot. It's been a really wonderful time. I've enjoyed myself. I'm sure. Well, I know Jonathan's enjoyed himself, and I hope you enjoyed yourself too.
I most certainly did. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, Jonathan. Keep up the good work that you guys do with Theme Park Workshop. You are, playing an important part in making sure those things that are memories from these parks stay alive and stay in our collective, because what better way to share in the storytelling experiences that are out there than talking about it with like-minded individuals? Like we just said, you are definitely great examples of like-minded individuals sharing your passion with others and with the world and preserving the parks and the storytelling that are out there. So good on you. And thank you very, very much for having me today.
Thank you so much. Okay. But before you go, AJ, where can people find you?
Well, thank you. I can be found at ajdanna.com. That's AJDANNA.com, or on Instagram at AJ Danna.
And to all of you listening at home, this has been Theme Park Workshop, the podcast, and we'll see you next week.